Welcome back to Reimagining Cyber. Today, we're talking about a security assumption that organizations have relied on for decades, keeping the bad guys out of the network and protecting what's inside, right? The problem is that modern environments, they don't really work that way anymore. We've got cloud applications, remote employees, contractors, SaaS platforms, distributed data, and basically attackers increasingly using legitimate identities and just purchasing from the internet, and they don't really have to smash through the front door anymore. So what happens when somebody gets through the firewall? And more importantly, what happens when they look like they're supposed to be there? So joining me today is Robert Salzwedell. My name is Tyler Moffitt, and we're going to talk about why perimeter security is only just one piece of the equation and what organizations should actually be protecting internally, and where concepts like zero trust maybe fit into all of this. So Robert, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Tyler.
Absolutely. So, Robert, we'll start from the top. They got in. Now what? Organizations, they spend enormous amounts of money trying to keep attackers out. We've got firewalls, endpoint protection, MFA, email security, identity controls, and basically everything else. But eventually, we have to assume that somebody is going to get through, right? So what changes once an attacker actually gets inside?
Zero trust is not an ordinary application you can buy. I heard customers asking for it, but it doesn't exist. Zero trust is a framework. It's a methodology on how you work, how you set up your security. And that goes for every part of your security, all the way from the perimeter down to the user access model and the data access model. So it also has huge implications on the performance under what you work, because, literally, it will be so easy as an IT department to shut everyone down and taking all access from everything. But that'll mean every time you need to do something, you need to ask for some delegated access to something. So one of the biggest things that we see in the trend is AI. Definitely, AI is great. We see a lot of movement within the whole IAM, so the identity access and the identity access management. But you have a user that has access to data. Okay, so like you said, if you get through the first firewall and you are inside, then you're legit, and you have access to the data.
Yeah. If I'm an authenticated user and I appear legitimate, what's actually stopping me from moving around and accessing other resources?
So here the answer should be, we should have perfectly control over our data. We should know our data. We should know where it is, what it contains, under which regulations the data is bound under, and then you should have access granted on these things. So if you call in from a VPN in North Korea, 5 o'clock in the morning, trying to access a share with very secret data, well, we should be able to enforce, for example, an additional MFA or something, but we're not. Only very, very few companies have that today. It's very easy to set up. It's very easy, if we take data access management, to put a wish score on the data and tie that directly to the user asking for it. But we don't do that. Zero trust here is really the answer, because zero trust enforced, then we don't trust who you are, even though you are legit. So we have means to that. We could send you an additional MFA. We could shut down your online access. We could do a lot of stuff within these programs to help you enforce the security without killing your performance.
Let's talk about, what does inside even mean anymore, right? 20 years ago, inside the network was relatively easy to understand. You had corporate network, you had internet. There was a pretty obvious boundary between the two. But today, you've got employees working remotely, cloud workloads, SaaS applications, contractors, personal devices. All this stuff. The data is spread across all of them, right? In between VPNs, not personal. So does the concept of a trusted internal network sort of even make sense anymore?
Yes and no. It's difficult because, as you say, there's no borders anymore. You can get it from anywhere. You can have AI agents who has perfectly access and are legit, but Are these inside or are they outside? Well, hard thing to answer. I think you need to treat everything as either open or closed. Of course, you have DMC and you have VPNs and stuff like that, but still, if you are inside, you're inside. But do we trust you 100% when you're inside? Well, today we really have to, because not everyone has the means to go through huge programs like Zero Trust really is. But the thing is, we need to have everyone marked as a risk or as a potential risk. And that is a problem for a lot of companies, because when we talk to them, we say, well, you need to treat everyone as a potential risk. And they say, no. George down from the accountant, he's a good guy. He doesn't do anything. But we're not talking about George. We're talking about George's identity in the system. So if someone gets to George's identity, they are George, right?
Let's make the situation even harder. What happens when the attacker doesn't even necessarily have to break through a security control because they've already compromised legitimate employee identity? We've talked about this a lot on the podcast, where there's a lot of the times just buying access. And so from the organization's perspective, how different is a malicious insider from an external hacker who's stolen legitimate employee credentials?
Well, the worst thing is to think that you don't know. It's very hard to find if you don't know what you're looking for. So you can buy an identity online. We know that. You can hack an identity. We know that. But there's one thing that you can do is you can't act like the identity you bought. So I know that Tyler Moffitt gets up in the morning. He's a little lazy, doesn't work until 10. And he comes in and he starts his laptop, and then he leaves for 15 minutes because he's going for a coffee. See, that's a pattern. And I could steal your identity. I could be Tyler Moffitt, but I can't access you. And that is actually our nearly only way around it, to actually look at the behavior. That's why when you see stuff like Microsoft, when developing endpoint protection, they actually have the behavioral signals in there. And these are important, and they will become more and more important in the future. Because, I mean, like I just said, I can steal your identity, but I can't act as you. And if I don't act as you, the system will make a noise, it'll raise an alert. Again, we're working under the box of zero trust. We trust you, but you are a potential risk, so we'll keep an eye. Not because we want to see how many hours you work or where do you go or what, but we need that to protect ourselves.
You know, we spend a lot of time talking about protecting networks and systems, but ultimately, all of this is because they're after something, right? They're after the data, the credentials, intellectual property, financial information, whatever they can get that's valuable, right? So my question to you is, how good are organizations at actually understanding where their sensitive data lives and, you know, who has access to it?
3 days ago, I did some research on that. So I found out that less than 40% of enterprise companies has an actual auditable framework for their data security. That means that less than 40% know where their data is. And still, 93% of these companies says that AI is extremely important for them to be able to keep business growth and performance within the company. So you want to grow, you want to utilize AI, but you don't know what you're feeding your AI or your LLM with. That is bound for trouble. Right. Sorry, but it is.
I agree.
And again, we have 4 pillars we can actually set up. We have data security, we have identity security, we have application security, and we have operational security. Right now, we were just talking between data and operational. Okay. All 4 are perfectly good examples on what you should do today. So what should you do first? Well, everyone is equal in that part, but data is a little more equal than the other ones. Understood this way. Have you ever seen anyone trying to steal your data to get to your identity?
I mean, I guess it depends on who is compromised and what they're after.
You're absolutely right. Everything we see, everything they do, if we're talking a malicious attack or an insider attack or whatever you do, going for the data. That's why data is so important. Data security should be number one focus. But of course, to be able to maintain that data security, you need to have an identity security that actually adds up and give access to the data. And then again, you need to have an application security that kind of like utilizes the identity and then utilize the right data given by the identity to the application. And especially when you're talking about AI, that is really, really important. Because otherwise, you're just leaving data out there that you might don't want other people to see. I mean, we've seen some terrible examples, right? You really got to take care. It's not good enough anymore to have an assessment, set up a security program, and just say, okay, we're there. Thank you. Bye-bye, security developer or consultant help. No, because if you're secure and you stop the project, you're secure for 1 second. Because when you get new data, when you get a new employee, when you make a new merger or whatever you do as companies do today, you're out of security. You're back to square one. You need to start all over again. So this is a program. So we are going from a snapshot security to a continuous validation, because that's what we need. We need to continuously validate our security posture all the time. And it's never going to stop. It's going to be even more. If you think there are a lot of regulations around AI and security today, well,
that's
tell
coming.
me about it in 5 years.
That's coming for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, lots of good, definitely talking points here. And I guess let's talk more about the blast radius, because let's say we've accepted two things. First is that eventually an account or device is going to be compromised. Second, we can't automatically trust something just because it's successfully authenticated. How should organizations design security around those assumptions?
Yeah, that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? How do you define a security layer? Well, first thing first, you need to find the baseline of the security that you want. And the first thing you should do, in my experience, is to look through to zero trust and see, well, can we do it all in once? No. Yeah, you could. If you shut down the company for around a year or two, you'll probably be able to. So where do you want to start off? Well, first of all, you need to protect your data. So, I mean, it's so much better that you, Tyler, are calling me 9 a.m. or calling to the help desk, say, I can't access this data. Mm-hmm. I would much rather have that than I would have say, okay, let's give them all access, because then we know we're good. Data. Perimeter security, because we need perimeter security. I mean, we don't have to kind of like say we enforce the zero trust, so we just open our doors and let everyone in, because there will be holes where people are able to do something anyway. So the perimeter security, our network security, our identity security, our application and our operational security, the way that we operate should be nearly as close. I mean, I think both you and I have worked with security operations centers, and they are heavily closed. And they should be. I think I heard of one time where a security operations center was compromised. That should be your operations center. You should treat it as operation, not just an ordinary IT department. So is it all in one? No. Is it side by side in parallel? Definitely. But with one message through it all, one line of message. This is what we're aiming for, and we're aiming for it constantly, and we are doing continuous validation on what we did. So not just saying, okay, we got a security operations center, everything is good, let's look at something else. No, you keep on working with that while opening another gate into, for example, application security, and driving that toward the same way.
Specifically drilling down into those organizations that do better internal security, right? And their model just looks better. What would you say it looks like? Well, where are you getting the biggest reduction in risk? What is it they're doing? Like, are we talking least privilege, segmentation, stronger identity controls, monitoring unusual behavior, better controls around sensitive data, like all of it? Where would you put the emphasis?
I would love to say all of it because it's a mixture.
Right.
Strong identities, strong access is really, really good. But that goes not only to access, but that goes also to the data. But if you don't know the data you're accessing, what kind of security risk that implies, then you have a weak link. If you have a very strong identity, and that could be an AI agent, because that is becoming an identity, well, what does that have access to, and how is it able to utilize it? Is it able to group or regroup with other agents within the application? Well, then you need to look at the way you structured your code. If you look at the security operations center, they enforce zero trust, 100%.
Let's bring this home with something actionable. I'm listening to this conversation and, realize that, especially with listeners, they might realize their organizations are still heavily dependent on the perimeter, right? But they're not going to rip apart their entire security architecture tomorrow. So what do you think are the first 2 or 3 things that you would tell an organization to actually do?
Before changing anything, you need to set some goals on what is it that you want to accomplish and how much do you want to bring into it? Because there's a budget to this. Definitely. This is not easy come. The next thing, I would always start with an assessment looking at my maturity as a company. We've seen lots of companies going out, buying AI, and they spend millions on it. And nothing ever came out of it. Why? Well, they weren't having a security maturity matching what they wanted to do. And by that, they couldn't achieve their goals. So first of all, be in there. Have a board who actually takes care of your security. Security can't be something today that is something lying on an IT director or at a financial director because it's all money and stuff like that. No, it's a workforce. It's a workforce where you need everyone. When you're including AI, you also need to drag in an accountant somewhere down at the storage house because you need also the variety of persons of looking at stuff when you're doing things. There are so many different inputs, but security-wise, yeah, you need the CISO, you need the CIO, you need someone from the board, you need someone who's actually delivering security, and you also need someone from the business. That's a security council. They're able to set the goals. They're able to get the management attention and be there under the whole period because this will just go on and on and on. There will only be more security. So do it now. Make that council sit there to actually answer these questions because, you can't just put it on the head on the CISO or at the CTO or at the CEO. They don't know all the details around it. They don't have the time. It's a joint effort.
How would you gauge whether you're actually getting better from what you want to do? Like, how should organizations measure and determine whether they're making good on reducing that exposure or doing what they set out to do?
The KPIs that you put within your goals should be measurable, right? But how do you measure security? Well, you can say, we didn't have any intruders this year, but my answer to that would be, yeah, you didn't find anyone, right? There might be 7 or 10 or 2 or whatever. So the only way is to measure yourself is actually, there should be 2 things that should be kind of like on top of this. The first is definitely how rigid, and rigid is the wrong word, but in Danish it's called stringent, but stringent, I don't know if that's the right word, but it is really a rigid process going through every steps every time you do something. That is measurable. Do you follow the process? Do you follow the policy? Because that's really, really important. The next one you want to look at is, while introducing more and more policies, you should be able to see that your performance goes up. Because if the performance goes down while introducing policies, That's because your policy is wrong. And then you are back to square one, where I actually talked about enforcing zero trust shouldn't affect the working behavior or the performance of your work. It should be right in between. I mean, you need to work with it, you need to live with it, but it should also be like as secure as can be. I mean, you will never get 100% secure. And let me tell you why. If I walk up to a CEO in a bank and says, yeah, I could help you get better security, top dollar, top notch security for $3 billion. And he'll say, okay, show me the ROI. And I say, there isn't any. You're just spending $3 billion. Well, you say, well, I have more customers, maybe. Not sure. Well, am I able to charge people for this? No, because this is just security, really good security for the bank. And he'll say, no way, not going to get 3 billion. Okay, now we go to the other side, the hacker side. A guy goes up and says, I got a brilliant idea. Give me 3 billion and I'll give you 15 back within 2 years. Well, that's a nice business case. And that is why we're never going to get to the bottom of this. They will always have, if not better, then at least the same means that we have to work out of. So you don't stop. You just keep on taking good security decisions all the way through.
I think one of the biggest takeaways here is, it's pretty straightforward. Perimeter security still matters, but we can't build a modern security strategy around the assumption that everything behind the perimeter is safe. Accounts are going to get compromised, devices are going to get compromised, attackers are going to get in, right? The question is whether or not what they're able to do while they're there, what they're able to access, and how far a compromise is allowed to spread. So thanks again to Robert for the conversation. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome, Tyler.
And thanks everybody for listening to Reimagining Cyber. Goodbye.